Was there a time, Zuby, when we did need to have this conversation, but maybe we've gone into a more post-racial world now?
There was probably a time, but it was also probably before I was born.
Wow. Okay.
You know, the fact that these conversations are happening more now around racism and what I would call racialism, a lot of it has been imported from the USA, that's for sure. And it's happening all across the West. So these same conversations and concerns that are happening right here and these type of investigations, the exact same things happening all across the USA, but with even more fervor. It's happening in Canada, it's happening in Australia. Basically, any Western, particularly English-speaking Anglosphere country, these conversations are going on. And I think that the demand for racism has been much higher than the supply for a long time.
I see what you mean, but who's vested in that then? Who has a vested interest in there being more racism than there really is?
People who profit from it.
Which is who?
There are organizations, there are groups, there are politicians, there are activists whose entire livelihood and reason for being would cease to exist if everyone just said, actually, you know what, we all agree that racism is bad. We also agree that more than pretty much any other part of the world or any other time in human history, we've made more progress in combating it, which was necessary in the past and, you know, and still is as we go on. But you don't combat racism with more racism.
But there'll be black guys watching this at home now who are like, hang on a minute, Zuby. You, like me, you will have been stopped more for knife crime. You might have not been prioritised for certain jobs. Like, you might have found yourself on the receiving end of insults on the street or threats from people.
Yeah.
So how do you not experience that? Or if you do you just handle it differently?
I honestly have not experienced it. And I through the nature of what I've done, I've actually met hundreds of thousands of people in the UK. Not exaggerating. I used to sell my CDs on the street and in shopping centers. I did that for over a decade. I have met hundreds of thousands of people in this country. I've traveled the world a lot. And I think I can categorically and fairly say that the UK is one of the least racist countries in the entire world.
Oh, I think that's
by quite a significant margin.
Absolutely. No doubt. And look at our government, look at our cabinet, look at our Prime Minister.
Exactly. Now, I'll say that and someone will go and say, oh, he said racism doesn't exist. No, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. It exists in every single country. It's a part of the human sin of, you know, bias and elements of tribalism. Right? Yeah. Tribalism in itself is not always inherently bad, but it can go off in bad ways.
Just white people who are
no,
racist.
not at all. No, not at all. So these sort of ideas, these radical ideas, which, you know, the term cultural Marxism has been sort of overused, but this is really what it is. Rather than looking at the class division, this is now splitting it across racial lines and trying to get and set people at each other's throats based on their skin color, their ethnic background, and so on. And ultimately, as Ben's already said, I mean, number one, many aspects of it are simply not true. And then secondly, it's not helpful, right? No one ever explains, okay, if you're gonna go and you're gonna sit a bunch of children down and you're gonna brainwash them with this nonsense, who is this helping? How is this going to help the black or brown kids? How is this going to help the white kids? How is this going to help anyone? It's just gonna make them look at each other with suspicion, harbor resentment, and that is the kind of thing that will actually cause real racism. Okay,
and I'm very much playing devil's advocate here because I pretty much agree with everything that you're saying. But in order to have a good debate on this, I think it's important. I'm putting myself in the shoes of people that I would know who would say, well, hang on a minute, my son won't have the same opportunities because they are black or Indian, Asian, as your white son will.
I think this panel is probably not the best example for, you know, people's skin color holding them back, because
we've done all right.
Yeah, I mean, you've got an Oxford and a Cambridge graduate, and both entrepreneurs and business owners. I mean, But
I think we're testimony to the fact that the United Kingdom is not institutionally racist. Actually, when I was brought up, and I welcome your view on this, Zuby, and yours, Beverley, I was taught everyone is equal.
Yes.
And that is a fundamental foundation from which you can advance. The minute you say black lives matter more than white lives, you've put a racial division down the middle of society.
But if we just consider where this came from, where this, as you would describe it as reverse racism, or racism against white people, has came from, it stemmed from positive discrimination, did it not?
Yeah.
So quotas in the workplace.
Diversity, inclusion. These are bad things.
But did they not start out with good intentions?
Well, I think it's more sinister than that. I think Zuby's absolutely right that there are vested interests, but there's a political ideology, and it's quite a sinister one. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there is a perpetual tug of war between democracy and those that govern us. And those that govern us want to take power away. And as you know, I'm a Brexiteer.
Yeah.
And one of the mechanisms by which our governing class strip the people of their democratic rights is by handing power over to independent bodies, sometimes domestically, sometimes supranationally. And the EU is a really good example. And if you believe in things like supranational bodies, the pooling of sovereignty, you can achieve your aim much more easily if you undermine national identity.
Yes.
And the way you undermine... Sorry, it's
go
quite
on.
complex, but the way you undermine national identity, essentially, is to get citizens of a nation to lose their self-confidence.
Yes.
So that's why you see an attack on white people in this country. You see, if you're at school, you're taught, and if you're white, that actually your forefathers were slave traders, that you should be ashamed of the British Empire, that those who guaranteed our freedom by fighting Nazi Germany were actually no more than white supremacists, that you are entitled, you should be ashamed of that entitlement. They undermine our language as well. They promote, ostensibly promote minority interest to the detriment of the majority by making you sexually phobic if you don't sign up to their LGBTQ plus agenda. You know, it's multifaceted, this attack.
And yet you think it has an ideological globalist.
It does.
Because you know what's so interesting, Ben?
Yeah.
Hearing you say the word self-confidence, because when you were talking then, Zuby, about the fact that you feel you never experienced overt racism, I'm looking at it and thinking, why? And what I'm seeing is self-confidence.
Yeah.
Like nothing but self-confidence. And I wonder whether that, because you give off this energy, that means you don't
look, I've had
yourself as a victim, and therefore you don't become a victim.
Look, I mean, you get idiots on the internet who might, send random stuff to you behind anonymous profiles, but who cares? What impediment is that to my life?
That's right.
The truth is, with all of these situations, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about racism, you're talking about sexism, you're talking about any of the phobias and isms, all these things that people are massively concerned about, the best that you can do as a society and as a culture, and even under the law, is treat everybody fairly. That's the best that you can do. Not set different standards for people, not coddle some people and tell some people they're victims, tell other people they're oppressors. Just treat everybody equally and fairly. That's it. Going back to Martin Luther King Jr., content of character.
These organisations that you've identified in this report, Ben, of who are working in schools, they don't see that, and they obviously want there to be this sort of division. And the idea of subconscious or unconscious bias, they would say...
that's just unbelievable.
You can't know.
Even if you don't feel it, you're basically biased.
Exactly. And we can't prove it. No. It's sort of Kafkaesque, isn't it, in a way? Like, we can't prove to you that you're inherently racist. Just believe us when we tell you that you are.
I mean, people accuse me of being a racist. And I say, well, I'm half Pakistani. And they go, yeah, but you're really white. And I go, no, I'm really not. I'm half-half.
Yeah.
And they can't get it. They think Suella Braverman's racist. She's not racist just because she wants to stop illegal crossings of the channel.
Can I bring an important point here as well? Is because what's going on here is what I call label inflation. And this is when you call everything and everybody a racist or a white supremacist or a sexist or whatever it is. These terms are devalued. They lose their meaning if you just throw them around, put them on everything like ketchup. Then when you do have someone who is a true white supremacist or a true racist or a true Nazi or whatever, what do you now label that person? You've already called everyone else racist and everyone else far right.
Yeah.
So if there is...
You've actually normalised them.
Yes, you've normalised it. You've taken away the power of these words by just overusing them so much.
Yeah.
So I think this is actually part of the long-term danger
But what a
of
difficult,
going and
what
calling
a
everyone
difficult kind of tide to stem of what we're describing here. How do we start the pushback?
People need to... Sorry to jump in.
No.
People need to say no. People need to just reject these ideas. I think my personal view, because I've been involved in these conversations for several years at this point, and I find the vast majority of people agree with me, regardless of their skin color and their background. You'll get some far lefty types who do disagree. But most people are not willing to state the things that we are saying.
Yeah.
Right? Again, because they don't want to. They don't want to be called a racist, right? But it's really this simple, and I think people need to stop being so gentle with it and just say no.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a parent and your child is going to school and they're teaching your little black boy that he's a victim and white people are out to oppress him and that they're all racist or whatever, no, you need to take that up with the school. If your little white boy or girl is going to school and being told that they're somehow responsible for atrocities that happened hundreds of years ago before they were born, which they have nothing to do with, and that they should be treating their friends and their fellow students differently, and they should be seeing race, all this stuff, it's utter garbage. This is not the way we were raised. And I think we've come out very well. And I'm concerned that by creating this type of division and animosity, you're actually going to end up creating a more racist society.
And what we need to head towards, which you said, Zuby, if I can just sum it up, is an equal opportunity society, not an equal outcome society. And part of this debate, I think, comes from there's an economic aspect to all of this too. Creating a dependency culture, making people dependent on the state, making sure everyone has the same outcome. It's almost communism. Really what we want is equal opportunity.
Right, we've got to move on. Thanks, guys.